Okay, start recording. Yeah, fine. I'm using my own. I have one tool, OBS Studio, so I'm using that to record. Yeah, we'll proceed forward.
Sure, Atul, please go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I was talking about realization. For some reason, this tool doesn't have that diagram, but I'll tell you about that diagram. So it's basically okay. I have a basic shape, right? Here it is. Yeah, I have it. So it's this plus it's dotted. Yeah. So this is the diagram for a realization tool. So what it basically means is if you have a class over here, let's call it a child class, then we just want to show that our interface has been implemented by this child class. That's it. That's what realization means. Okay, so we don't generally come across this particular arrow, but it's good to know about it. If you use it in your interview, to just show that you know about this particular kind of relationship. So this is what is called realization. It just means that this interface has been realized by this particular child class. Going back to dependency, dependency is where is dependency? Dependency is this one. Yeah. So what it basically means is uh, the class over at the left side would at some point be using class over at the right side. I'll explain that. How do I mean it? Let's call it class one. Okay. And wherever the arrow is pointing to, that will be your dependent side. So it means suppose I am a user and I have to calculate something, right? So if I am a user, I am class one, then my calculator would be class two. That's how it works. So as a user, I am dependent on class two for my calculation, but only for that amount of time. After that, I don't want to worry about this particular class. So that's why I'm sort of dependent on that. So that's why this is called a dependency relationship. Okay. Another is association. Association is pretty simple. If you have two classes, the diagram is really very simple. You want to have a class at each end. So it is class one. Okay. And then you have class two. So what we are trying to say over here is these two classes are associated in any form. So what basically it means is these two classes, they want to talk to each other and they want to say class one wants to show UI. So they say in association, the classes would be having a verbal relationship between them. Okay, that's how you identify them. By verbal, I mean the function listed over here would depict some kind of verb. So it could be show UI, it could be clear screen, or it could be calculate something, or any kind of verb, any kind of action you want to take. Okay, so that's how that association works. Okay, then we have generalization. Generalization is, where is generalization? This is generalization. Now this is implements. This is generalization. So this is very simple.
Uh,
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt. I did not get this association. Can you please explain once again?
yeah, sure. Just let me write. Yeah. So yeah, so in association, what we are trying to say is the classes on either end of that particular line, they are associated with respect to any action. Okay. So this could be a batsman, and this could be a ball. Ball is also a class, right? So what would the batsman do to a ball? He would hit it. So in that case, it would change to hit or can hit. No, hit. Can hit is not a verb. Hey, where did I write it? Huh. So does this make the example clear?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and similarly, ball can also have some kind of association back to class, to batsman. What it could have, ball can go towards the batsman, right? So in that case, we will just write go towards. So going is also a verb, right? So that's how you figure out what kind of association it should be. First of all, it should be a verb, so it should show some kind of action has been taken, and it should be between those two classes, what they are trying to do. Okay, I hope that makes it clear. Generalization is the simplest of all. It's your plain old simple inheritance. So we have a plain old parent class, and we will have one child class. So child class is extending the parent class. Okay. Finally, we have aggregation and composition. Okay, so aggregation is when the symbol for aggregation and composition is very similar, but aggregation has no dots. I mean, it's not colored at the end. Composition is colored towards the end. So I'll just write how to put it. Yeah, this is dependent class. Okay, on the left side, and where the arrow has ended, that is independent class. That's how you can remember it. Okay, yeah. So what we are trying to say over here is dependent class on the left side, it depends on the class mentioned on the right side. Okay, that means without the independent class, dependent class cannot perform its functionality. Okay, but independent class doesn't even need to worry about dependent class. It's not even aware of dependent class. That's what this arrow means. So usually when in code, how you will see it is independent class goes as dependency injection into dependent class. Okay, for example, something like this. Okay, let's write it as class dependent. Okay, I forgot to ask. I hope everyone is aware of Java and its programming languages, I mean its paradigms.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I am comfortable only in Java. Okay, but language doesn't matter.
Atul,
So, yeah.
yeah, okay. Atul, can I take independent class as a utility where the other class is just utilizing it?
Yes, you can take it. So, the concept is very simple. Independent class should not be aware about dependent class. It should not worry about dependent class. If there is a crash in dependent class, class should not crash. So that's how you can view it. Okay. So very simple example of this would be dependency injection. Okay. So suppose I want to write the constructor, I would take independent class object as a dependency injected object. That's it. So in my main, suppose this is my main, and I have to write, I have to create an object of dependent class. So what I'll do is first I'll create an independent object, right? And then I'll create a dependent class object. But this time I'll just pass this guy over here. So you can see, right? I cannot create dependent class if I don't have independent with me. Okay, but independent doesn't need to worry about dependent. So that's how you. I mean, this is the most simple example of what is this? Yeah, aggregation. Yeah, the most simplest example of aggregation. Another examples which you would often see in code is using strategy pattern. Okay, not exactly strategy, but you will have setter methods inside dependent class. Okay, so it would be like set independent, yeah, say object. Okay, so it will take an object of type independent. That's it. Okay. So at runtime, because object creation is always heavy, right? So you don't want to take it in your constructor and sit. Okay. Suppose the program could be such that and this guy is used only in very rare circumstances. So why do you want to save it in your constructor in your class, right? So what we do is we provide some kind of setter inside it. So when you need the use of independent, only then you call this object, this API, and then you set the object that time, and then you use. That is the idea. Okay, but depending, you can I mean remember it as dependency injection for aggregation. Okay, composition goes one step forward. In composition, what happens is these two classes are sort of dependent on each other, so it is no more independent. It is a dependent class now. So let me make it composition dependent. Yeah. So what basically I'm trying to say over here is this object will be created inside my dependent class. Okay. So something like this would happen. Something like this would happen. That's the only thing which I'm trying to say. So if my dependent class crashes, then my composition class object also goes away. Okay, so that is why it is a very strong form of aggregation. You see, right? It is still aggregated inside dependent class, but now it is living with this dependent class. It lives inside the dependent class. If this guy goes and crashes, this will also crash. Okay. In diagram, how you would depict is same. You will have only two entities at either endpoints. This will be your where is that? I mean, let's call it class one. Okay, and this will be your you can call it inner class, but it's, I mean, just for logical reasoning, I'm saying it's inner class. It will it can be inner or it cannot be inner. Okay, but you get the idea, right? So this class will have an instance of this class always inside it. Okay, if class one dies, so will inner class it will go and die. Okay, so this is some six UML diagrams you should remember. Okay, you can practice it writing on paper and all. Always remember, wherever the arrow is, right, that is your parent. Okay, so if you check out, that's why I've always written parent towards the arrow. Okay, so the left side will always go and implement, or it will always go and have the instance of that class, or it will always be depending on that particular class on right side. Okay, so that's how you remember. I will now delete them. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any questions on these aspects? Anyone? Fine. Cool. So yeah, it will take some time if you are new to it. Just draw it in your copy, and after two, three diagrams, you would be clear. You just need to remember, like if I say realization, then you just need to imagine what's happening. If I say aggregation and composition, you just need to figure out, okay, what is happening in background. Okay, yeah, coming to LLD interview. So if you have a 1 hour interview, then you won't be targeting code completion, but my suggestion to you is you should target code completion. It should be a production level code. That means even the import statements which you would be using, suppose you want to import Java util class, you should write those statements as well. Okay, it just creates a very good impression on your interviewer. Yeah. So how would you take your interview? First, you spend 10 minutes in your requirement gathering and assumptions. Okay, assumptions is what you have to suggest. Requirement gathering is what the interviewer and you will figure out together. So basically, you'll ask questions like, what should be the requirements for this particular uh, question. Okay, and then he will say, okay, we should do this, we should do that, and then after that, listening to all that, you just figure out what should be the assumption should be. So what exactly do I mean when I say we have to figure out? Okay, see, assumptions is where we simplify our own design. Okay, so this is where we save ourselves. So if suppose you are designing a library management system, okay, he will give you very basic requirements like user should be able to book a you should be able to book a particular book. He should be able to check out that book. He should be able to see if the book is available or not. He should be able to search and all. Okay, right. So these are all his requirements. So assumptions from our side should be there should only be one library. Okay, that's how I'm designing it. uh, I can scale it to say n libraries in future, but for simplicity I'll keep it only one. So that is my first assumption. Okay, and then another assumption could be which will save my time and it will simplify the design also. It could be something like how to say how to say anyone can think of any other assumptions? Yeah. So suppose something like we consider that in this library only one book is available at any point of time. So there are no multiple copies of that book. Okay. So I simply made my life easier. Okay. But don't simplify it to a very large extent. Okay. Just keep it very generically simple. Okay. Yeah. So once you're done with assumptions and spend a very good time on it, because use cases and class diagrams, they depend a lot on assumptions and requirement gathering. I'll come to that why they depend. Okay. Yeah, and when I say you have to gather, you just need to actually write down the requirements in front of that interviewer, whatever he says, like user should be able to check out the books, something like this. Okay, these are very important. These will help us in future in designing use cases and class diagram. Once you're done with requirement and assumptions, then you should move forward to use cases. So in 5 minutes, you should be able to draw that particular use case. Okay, in use cases, what basically we do is it's it's like what that system is supposed to do. So if it's a library management system, then we have to show that, okay, this system can allow the user to check out books. The system can impose a fine on the user, something like that. Okay, I will go in detail in use cases. Another is third one is class diagram. So these two diagrams which we have to are the diagrams which we have to do. Use case, it's a diagram. Okay, yeah. So these are the two diagrams which you have to draw. Once you have drawn the use case diagram, it's very easy to draw the class diagram. Okay, and once you've drawn the class diagram, it's really very easy to draw the skeleton code. The code completion is where it gets tricky, because once you have the skeleton code, it just means that you have variables declared inside your classes. You have method names declared inside your classes. Code completion is where you will actually go and write those method implementation. Okay. So because it requires implementation, so in a 1 hour interview, going in depth would not be feasible. Okay. But I'll still suggest that you go in depth, because in code completion, this is where you can show your knowledge of design patterns. Okay, and I made a list of design patterns which we should be aware of and which we can very easily apply. One is strategy, another one is factory, another one is observer. Okay, another one is which was that? Adapter. Okay, and decorator. Okay, yeah. So this is where you can show your knowledge of design pattern. This is where you can show your knowledge of concurrency. By concurrency, I means just use some threads and play around with them. Okay, because it's a if even if it's a library management system, you can have a case where that library has two windows. Your system is running simultaneously on two laptops. They are connected to separate windows, physical windows, and there are two users going for the same book. Okay, so that's where a concurrency will come in. So how do you handle that kind of concurrency? So therein you can show that you know about threads. How would you initialize those threads? Will the threads be always running, or they would run only when when it is identified that there is a deadlock in the system, something like that. Okay, so that's where you get to show off. So I would suggest still you go into code completion. But if you see that you're running out of time, then at least during skeleton code itself, or yeah, during skeleton code itself, you punch in any design pattern which you remember, or which you think is going to go over there. In my experience, you can always put an observer anywhere in your design. Okay, and you can always put concurrency anywhere you design. Okay, factory also I've seen most of the times it is used. So these three design patterns you can always push in front of your interviewer. Okay, but be prepared for questions for that as well. Okay, yeah. And finally, exceptions and use cases. So exceptions is where you will inform your interviewer that okay, I see that during this particular use case an exception can be thrown. Suppose that book was just has just arrived, and its entry is just made, but there was some failure in the database, so that entry is not yet present, but the user can see the book. So that's an exception case. How do we handle it in code and all, something like that. Okay, and test case is where you need to write that what would be the test cases for your particular design. Okay, so in that, what I basically mean is, in your skeleton code, whatever APIs you have written, right, how do you test them? And that's it, nothing else. Okay, so how do you test them? How do you test them? Basically, where you go into your main, and then suppose I had an API called lendbook. Okay, so it used to take book as a parameter. That's it. Okay, so what should happen if I pass the book as null? Okay, that is one test case. So basically, there are three test cases possible at any point of time, or in any point of in any kind of system. One is functional, one is a negative test case, and one is a boundary test case. Okay, functional is where we function is where the system is actually running and you are doing something. Okay, so in this case you can just pass a book as non-null parameter, and then it should return the status that book has been issued. So the return type should be int. This int should be status of some kind. Okay, so functional test case of this particular thing would be, I pass the book as non-null and I expect the return status as success. So how do I write this thing? So I will just this thing. I will put this thing. If the return type of this is success, so I'll declare one variable called success in some book class and all. Yeah, okay, let me put it like this. So that would be public static final. Okay, so I'm just writing this particular test case. So is equal to say I had a book object. Okay, um, book object here dot lend book. That's it, and I'm passing non-null. I'm passing some XYZ object of that book. Okay. So this object, this particular API will return an integer status. That integer status should be equal to success. So I print some log over here. That's it. Print log. This is just one test case. Negative test case would be, in this particular case, negative test case would be when you pass book as null. So your system shouldn't crash. So my API should be able to handle that particular null object. Okay, and boundary test case could be, in this particular case, it should be same as null, because only two values are possible over here, right? One is actual book object and one is null. So in that case, it should be boundary. But if you had something like calculate, okay, calculate, and it used to take two ints. Okay, so boundary test cases would be what you pass in int max and int min in both of these. So it should still be able to calculate. What should be the negative test case? You should pass float inside it. Okay, because float will never fit inside int, or will it? It will get auto box, right? So yeah, in negative test case, we are basically looking to break it. I think I took a bad example. Yeah. Calculate will not have a negative test case, because whatever you put inside this int, it would auto box it and it would reduce it to its integer set. But in case of lend book, you understood what should be a negative test case. You just need to pass the book. So just remember three things: functional, negative, and boundary. You need to write these three kind of test cases. When I say write, you just don't need to actually write. You just need to show something like this. I'll compare it like this, and it will print some log and all. That's it. That's what your interviewer is looking for. So you do talk about test cases as well. Okay. Now, any questions, anyone?
Not no question.
Okay. I hope you're. I mean, you're getting this, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Now moving forward to our.
I
Yeah.
Then what I want to ask is, when we give some kind of interviews like design kind of interviews,
Right.
so use at the first step, requirement gathering. See,
Correct.
when interviewer has given us library management system, there could be lot of things he might be expecting, right? So I mean, I think it should be better, right? We should ask him what exactly, I mean, what all at least things he wants us to cover in the design, because what I think is like there could be a lot of things in the management system, right? When we go further right in the mid of the interview, we can get confused.
Correct.
I think we should clear about the requirement what we need, what we want to design. Uh, uh, then
Yes.
only we should go for the design. Even these test cases as well, because test is also based on the design, what all you are going to provide in the design. It could be multiple, I mean, it could be infinite as well, I mean, how
Correct.
whatever you can think, it may be there. So I think it should be better. My first, I mean, uh, uh, as a person, my first approach would be, first we should very clear about the requirement, what interviewer exactly looking for. Then we need to stick around only those, right? Not think very widely, right.
Yes, yeah, it's true in a sense, but as per my experience, generally interviewer will just say that design WhatsApp, okay, and he will just give you some vague requirement like user should be able to send and receive message. So what now he expects from us is we go big, okay. So you cannot go, as you said, right? You cannot go so big that you get confused further down the line while
Yes.
drawing sequence diagram. So that's where we have to play smart and we have to play to our strengths. So when CS said design WhatsApp, just say that okay, give me 2 minutes. In those 2 minutes, that's where you start playing. That you start thinking about those requirements where you are comfortable at. Okay, and those should be very basic. Like WhatsApp should have that double tick function. That's very interesting to talk about, right? So you should pick
Yes.
something like that. That okay, my system will have this kind of send receive acknowledgement kind of thing. Okay, suppose in a very simple library management system, one of the requirements could be that the same system is deployed by different branches of this library in the city, and then you scale it to the entire nation. That could be one thing, because if you see a very simple system like library management system, it has nothing much to do inside it, correct? So how do you showcase your knowledge then in further? So that's where you could put up something like this kind of use case, that okay, I'll design something which is scalable, because in that case you can obviously put where is that factory over there. Okay, and concurrency you can put over there, something like that you can do. So if I have to give advice, then I would just say take 2 minutes and play to your strengths. Just figure out on in vague manner on top
Mm,
of what the interviewer given you what you can do, and always play assumptions on your side. Don't ask interviewer about assumptions, okay? Because here is where we save ourselves. That would be like how I would go.
right. So whatever we have thought we are going to design, and during the interview time, we should stick around that, right? We should not in the
Correct.
mid of the interview.
No,
We should
don't
not.
go into inventory.
Ah, right.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. I mean, you will come to understand why you won't go haywire in middle of interview. We'll come to that part as well. I mean, by design, it is structured in such a way that you will not be able to go. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
So once you are done with your requirement gathering and all, right? I mean, this is just how much time we should take, but this is where the actual fun will start happening. So there are only 5 steps to any LLD. Okay. One is requirement gathering and assumption. Okay. Once you're done with that, then we draw the use case diagrams. Okay. Then we draw the class diagram skeleton, and then tests and exceptions. Okay. Now, when I say you have to write the requirements and assumptions, I actually mean that you have to write. Okay, so if we'll just jump into library management system now. Okay, wait. Okay, yeah. So what could be the requirement of a library? Okay, so a requirement could be. Can you guys suggest whatever comes to your mind? We should have
Book.
searching capability, right? By say title. It can also search by author, correct? Date. Okay, don't put question mark. Yeah. Okay, and each book has to be identified by some category, right?
ID.
Yeah, ID has to be identified by ID, right? Uh, what else? Checkout functionality should be there, correct? User should be able to check out books, correct? What else can be there? User has to be assigned an ID, assigned unique ID, correct? What else? User can renew the books.
Right. Or one can be if someone has already borrowed, when it will be returned back to the library. That also.
Yeah, so if it's already borrowed, then return,
Yes, yes.
right? Okay.
We can have a reserve function.
Yeah, reserve should also be there. Future reserve should also be there, correct? What else? Yeah. So if
Uh,
you
li-
okay, we have already have search books, right?
can we have librarian and member kind of thing?
Yeah. So librarian should also be assigned an ID.
A librarian can be able to block or add users or members.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Block members. Okay. Yeah. Let's consider these requirements as of now, and we'll put our assumptions as well. Okay. So what assumption should we take? There should be a finding mechanism. Okay. First of all, librarian should be able to collect finds, right? What else can be there? We can have a barcode kind of system, barcode on books to scan and book. Okay. What else? By librarian, because once the books comes in, he has to catalog, right? So for this cataloging feature, cataloging, correct.
One
Uh,
question.
yeah,
Will we be maintaining the list of members in the library and the list of librarians also?
yes, yes. But I mean, you can write it in the requirement,
Okay.
but you will have to write something like this: system has to maintain
Okay. System is.
list of members. Okay. Another could be librarian can should be able to add, modify the books, right? Modify and delete also if the book has damage, right? Each book will have some date, correct? So that we can arrive at fine. Should have some lending date. Okay. Okay, and we are not considering this thing multiple copies of same book. Okay. copies of same book. Okay. Now, if you put something like this, right, most of the times interviewer will go back to you that, okay, why are you not considering this? Okay. So the simplest answer, you can always keep it simple. It is one of the design principles also. It's called KISS, keep it simple, silly. It means that first we get our basic infrastructure working. Only then we go for, say, scaling. So you can just reply that, okay, first I'll need to keep it simple, but I will leave a provision that multiple copies can exist. Okay, just make a note over here. Multiple copies can exist. Okay, so if you have done any actual design in your companies, there is a section in design document also wherein something like this, if it occurs, right, then you make a note of it. Okay, the rationale is very simple. Nobody asks for multiple copies at this time, right? So why should I design it? I mean, I'm getting paid for writing code, correct? So why would I do it if nobody has asked? So if my requirement doesn't mention it, then why would I do it? Okay, so it's just where the interviewer is trying to capture what is going around in your mind. I mean, why did you skip this step? Okay, so that's how you address that. Okay, that I'll do it, but sometime in future. Currently, my requirement doesn't say it. Okay, now once you have written these requirements, right, this is your Bible now. Okay, don't go away from this. Okay, I'll come to why you should not go away from this. But as of now, we are clear. Our assumptions are written and our requirements are written. When I say written, you have actually written it down. Do write it down in your interviews. Okay. Now we'll move forward to our use case diagram. Okay. Give me 1 second.
There is one question. Like,
Yeah.
the librarian should be able to collect fines. We have taken as assumption. So fines, like,
Yes.
should we take like with the particular dates? There should
Yes.
become.
Yes. That also I took it that each book
Okay.
should have some lending date after which the fine would start incurring. So librarian now knows what kind of fine should be there. Okay. Because we have a requirement here somewhere. Where is it? Where is it? No, we don't have that kind of. Block members. So how would he block member? That member is not returning books, that right, and not paying fines, so he has to block. Correct.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Now we are going towards our use case. Correct. How do you draw a use case diagram? It's very simple. And the first thing you draw is a rectangular box. Okay, and you put your system name on the top. Okay, how do I get it on top? Yeah, like this. Okay, it's pretty much a convention. So if whatever tool you are using in your interview, it doesn't work out like this, just mention it anywhere. But you just need to mention your system. Okay, at any point of time, we should know what we are designing. So you just mention it on top. Then the first thing you do is you identify your verbs in your requirements and assumption. Okay, so what are the verbs over here? Search is a verb, correct? And what are by ID? Okay, identification is a verb. Okay, checkout is a verb. Okay, assignment is a verb. Okay, verb means any action. Renewing is a verb. Okay, already borrowed is a verb. Return is a verb. Okay, future reserve in itself is a verb. Okay, librarian should have id, have is a verb. Okay, so what I'm trying to figure out here is what would be my functions inside my use cases. Okay, so for example, just going by that, I'll take one by one. Search book by book, right? All the use cases you will write in oval shaped. Okay, so there is a search functionality. Okay, now go back to your requirement. If you want to find out your use cases, what you have to do, just go back to your requirement and assumptions. Just copy paste whatever verbs you will be able to find. Like checkout. You have checkout somewhere, right? Where is it? Checkout. So this is also a verb. So you put in checkout. Okay. Now, how will this guy have an ID? He will have to register, correct? That means register itself is a verb. Let's write it as register member, correct? Okay, and what else could be there? We have librarian functions also, right? He should be able to add, delete, modify, correct? So these are three verbs which we have. So we can have three more actions over here, correct? And let's collectively call them as update, correct? Oh wait, update is updating a existing copy of book. So we should have three actions. We should have add also, and then we should have delete also. Okay. Now our librarian is also supposed to have one ID. We had that requirement as well. Librarian should have ID, correct? Oh no, this guy should have registered as librarian, as employee, and our user should register as something. Where is our user? Okay, we didn't write that. We need to take. It makes sense, right? User should have ID, register as user. Okay. Yeah. So that means we have to put something for our this thing also, librarian also. So we'll put register for librarian. Okay, because librarian can also change with time, correct? So whenever librarian changes, his ID will change. That means we need a register for this guy also, right? Okay. Now we have to identify. So you saw, right? If you at runtime you've put any kind of XYZ requirement here, okay, something should be able to done. Okay, this something now needs to be a use case in your diagram. That's why I was saying don't, once you're done with your requirement, don't go and change those, because accordingly your use cases should change. Okay, so you don't need to change that. Okay, now consider this: a librarian, a user has come to your library. Okay, how do you know that he has an ID? Okay, so there should be a process of identifying that user, correct? I think that should be some kind of login. Okay, so that means login, logout in itself they are verbs. So I'll just put in like this. Okay. Yeah, so these are all possible use cases in the system. Okay, now use cases, they themselves are categorized into two sub use cases. The difference is these use cases are among them. Okay, what what I mean by among them is we call those two categories as inclusive use cases and exclusive use cases. Okay, so what do you mean by inclusive use case? Inclusive use case is some use case which is internal to the use cases, and it is done very frequently. Like you can have a lot of books coming in and getting updated. So whenever these two things will happen, they will eventually go and update some DB, right? So that updation of that database in itself is a verb, so it's a use case. So we have to put something like this. So let me just expand. Yeah. Yeah. So this will be an inclusive use cases, okay, which happens very frequently. Okay, exclusive is same thing, but it happens very rarely. Okay, something like what could be very rare in a library? This thing. Anyone has any suggestions? Uh, Something like delete the user. Okay, usually when you go to a library, you don't delete very frequently, right? They have tenures, say 6 months membership, 12 months membership. So this particular use case will happen very rarely. So you put them as extensive use case. Okay, how do you depict it? You depict it using double arrow. Okay, how do I draw it? Do I have it? Wait, I don't know in Glyphy where it is. Is it here? No. Okay, let me open Paint. Yeah. So how do you draw an exclusive arrow? Where is it? Okay, like this, double bracket, double bracket, and here you write extends. Okay, that's how you show. Where should be the arrow be? The arrow should be towards the sub use case. So it would be something like this. If I have to draw it, it would be something like this. But it should be from user. because this is the guy who will get deleted, right? So it should be something like this. Okay. And you should write double bracket extends in between. Okay, these are only for those use cases which are not very frequent. Okay, they will happen once in a while, but which happens very frequently. You should put it like this. Again, the arrow would be towards the use case, and you should put inside, in place of extends, you should put include. Okay, again double arrow, then include. Where the arrow should be, it should be towards the sub use case. Okay, fine. This is clear. Okay. So now we understood why the requirements have to be, not changed on the fly, because again, you will have to come back and maybe change some use cases. Okay, moving forward. Next step, what we have to do is we have to identify what are the actors on this system. Okay, actually that should have been the first step, but I skipped it. So this is the symbol for actor. So what do you think should be the actors? One is very simple. One is the user, right? Who is an actor first of all? An actor is someone who would be using the system. Okay, or who would get affected by the use of this system. Okay, so using the system is very simple. User is going to use this. Our librarian is going to use it. Correct? Yeah. And what could have been, these are called primary actors. Okay, primary actors, we always write them towards our right side of the left side of the diagram. Okay, and another is secondary actors. So what are secondary actors? They always lie on right side. In this particular use case, there would be no secondary actors. But if I have to define, right, if I had to, just for example, if I had to define, so I would, the use case would be something like this, that from this particular library, you can actually buy books. Okay, if you have to buy books, then it would go through a payment gateway. You'll have to make some payment. That payment will go outside this system to a bank. Correct? That bank is not a primary actor of the system. That bank is a secondary actor, because the system started using the bank. The bank didn't use the system, right? So that's how you figure out who is the secondary and who is the primary. Primary will always use the system. Secondary will be always used by the system. You can remember it like that. Okay, and secondary is always towards the right side. Okay. In our case, there would be no secondary actors. Okay. Now, do you see a similarity over here? These two are actors, right? And we are going to assign them IDs, correct? Right? So that means in this library management system, let me just shorten it. Right. In this library management system, there are going to be two actors. Both of them are going to have same ID, I mean, some kind of ID, and both are going to use the system, right? So can I say that, these two particular user and librarian, they should derive out of some kind of account kind of class? I can, right? There should be some kind of account class, and it should have a generalization. That means user should also extend account, and my this guy should also extend. A librarian should also extend. Okay, I can say this, right? Anyone have any questions on this? No? Okay. Yeah. So so that's how you figure out who are the actors. What is the relationship between the actors? Okay. If you find that, okay, those two actors could be deriving some common functionality, then simply you apply inheritance over here. Okay. You make one common class and you show that these guys are extending it. Okay. So up till this point, we are done with our use cases and we are done with our actors. Next step is connecting these use cases to their actors. Okay. So who do you think can search? Member can search, correct? So how do you connect? You use association to connect. Okay. What is this guy going to do? He's going to search, right? What is user going to do? He's going to check out. Okay. What is user going to do? He's going to register himself as a member. And what is user going to do? He's going to log in and log out, right? Now, what is librarian going to do? Okay, let me pull librarian for here so that it's more clear. Okay, this arrow is still going towards our librarian. Okay, let me, no, 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 no. Yeah, this is still going towards our librarian. But what is librarian going to do? What would be his actions? His actions are, he can update books, he can add books, he can delete books, and he is also able to register for librarian. Okay, so we will do, again we'll use only association. Okay, that means no arrows at either end, because associations was what it was showing verbs, correct, actions which you are about to take. So that's why we use associations in our use case diagram. So this is your use case for librarian. We can also delete books. Okay. Now, how do you connect intrinsic use cases? I mean, inclusive use cases, of course, update, add, and delete were the only guys who were using update database functionality, right? So you use this particular arrow. Okay. It's a dotted arrow, actually. Okay, and you just need to write exclude, extends, or include. Okay, so every less frequent activity you will write extends, and every frequent activity you'll write database. I don't have that arrow, so I don't want to draw it over here. Actually, I have it. Yeah, but it's a wrong arrow, but just assume that it is extends. Actually, include, double arrow, include. Yeah, it's actually look, it should actually look like this. Okay, so now you understand. So now what should be delete user should be able, who is going to delete the user? Delete the user is not going to be done by our user, it should be done by a librarian, correct? And where should that functionality be? Yeah, I think I took a bad example. I didn't write the use case for delete user. Okay, so first I'll have to go and update my requirement that user should be able to delete. I mean, librarian should be able to delete members, and then I will make one use case over here for deleting the users, and then I will do a delete user as a intrinsic extends this thing. But you got the idea, correct? I don't want to disturb the diagram as of now, so I'm not drawing it. So we'll just remove it. It's not necessary that you will have these inclusive use cases and inclusive and exclusive use cases. Okay, you can also not have it. I mean, it depends on if you want it to show it to your interviewer or not. It's not a hard and fast rule that these use cases, internal use cases, should exist, but it's always good to show. Okay, it never hurts. Actually, it's bonus points if you show. Okay, so as of now, our use case diagram is ready. Okay, it shows the actors, it shows how the actors are connected to whatever they are going to do. Okay, and it shows the relationship between the actors if it exists. Okay, it can also not exist, right? Yeah, any questions up to this point? No. Yeah, okay. Now moving forward to class diagram. Okay, how do you make a class diagram? So again, you go back to your requirement, okay, and figure out how many nouns were there. Okay, so what kind of nouns are there? Books is there, title is there, author is there, ID. Can ID be a noun? ID is a noun, right? No, ID is a noun. Okay, credential, correct. So ID is a noun. User is a noun, right? What could also be a noun? Librarian is a noun, right? Employee is a noun. Okay, so as a thumb rule, whatever nouns are there, and in your assumption also. So barcode could be a noun. What all are there? Yeah, fine is a noun, right? Yeah, so what all nouns are there, they would form your classes. Okay, as a thumb rule, those will be your class names. So if I have to go back and draw class diagram, I'll just delete it. I'll start drawing. Okay, hey, this is class, right? Oh, this is not class. Simple class. Okay, actually I don't want to use this, I want to use this. This is an object. This is what package. Okay, class, I want to use this. Yeah, because any kind of class will have attributes and methods. Okay, yeah, so this class will be librarian, the first noun I identified. Okay, and what could it be? Our library management system also is a class, right? So let me put lib management system, because it's a system is a physical identity, so it has to be a class, correct? Book is a class. We are beyond time, so shall we go for like another 10-15 minutes? I can complete this.
Yes.
Okay,
Atul, one thing. So now before this, we just made the use case diagram, right?
right.
Now we jump to the class diagram. So when we make class diagram, we need to consider the use case diagram, right? What all
Yes,
use cases we need to design.
correct. Actually, let
That
me
that,
undo
that
it.
is what the purpose of
Class
making.
diagrams. Yes, that is correct. So let me put it in a new. Okay. So the question is how you can make a class diagram, right? One thing is, once you identified all the nouns, you will have the class names. But how are those classes going to interact, or what all will be the method inside it? So for
Yes.
those methods, you need to refer your use case diagram. So there should be a search method, there should be a checkout method, there should be a register method, something like that. Okay, and how do you figure out what should be the attributes of those classes? The attributes would be the parameters of that method. Okay, so that is why it is important to write the requirements so that you can figure out the use cases first. Once you have the use cases and you have the nouns in your requirements, then you can figure out your class diagram. So does that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just keep my class diagram as it is. Okay. And I will just quickly write librarian. Okay. I'll just copy paste this guy. So library management system was also one of our classes, right? Library management system, correct? Another one was book. Book would be a noun and it's a class. Put it in center. Hey, what happened? Book, man. Ah, wait. Delete this guy. Okay, book is a class. What else could be the class? I had one database updation also, right? Database is a noun, so it could be also a class. Okay, you don't need to actually guess. You just go and check out your requirements. Okay, see, database, we haven't written it anywhere over here. We didn't write, right? So why am I including it? So actually, I'm doing it wrong. I am just including because where do I fit my this particular include use case? This I picked up on fly, correct? So I should have written it in my requirement first. Okay. So let me actually put it down. Where is that add delete? Yeah, and update database. Yeah. So this is how I captured the database. So now it becomes a noun and it should be in my use class diagram. So never put anything else in your class diagram other than what is mentioned in your requirement. Okay. So that is for our benefit only. I mean, the candidate's benefit. Okay. Because it keeps very simple. I'm just looking for whatever noun is there in my this thing. Okay. What else could be there? Member could be there. Member is also a noun, right? And always write classes with this thing. Okay, what else could be there? The member has to have an account, correct? Did we write account? Login was there, right? Where is that login? His account. So that's why it's very important to write the complete requirement. Okay, just don't put like this. Okay, because I had this in mind that he should be able to log in, log out, but I was not able to figure out where to put this. I mean, what is logging in and what is logging out? Actually, he's logging in out of his account. So account is a class. Okay. And of course, user would be a class. Okay. Yeah. So why did I put user by when I already had member? Because of my use case diagram. Look at my use case diagram. I have a user and actually this guy is a member, right? Oh no, wait. Yeah, we can also have one particular use case where we have a guy who has come into the library, but he's not a member. So what is that guy? That would be a user, correct? A simple user. So that means we'll have to have this guy as member, and this is a simple user. So he's like an unregistered user, unregistered member. Oh wait, let me put this as member. He's registered. It makes sense, right? This is like a normal library also, and this guy is simple user, so he's unregistered. Okay, so as an unregistered user, he cannot do anything actually. Okay, he cannot log in, log out, he cannot do anything. He can probably go and talk to some librarian or maybe search or maybe do something else. But that's why there is no association with this particular guy. Okay, but we have made provision from him. So he's a user and one guy is a member, and you have an account, right? You can also have fine class. Okay, yeah. What else we have?
Barcode and ID.
Yes,
Barcode
we need to
also
have
is now.
barcode also, correct. And you need to have ID also. That is also right. So ID would be of user also, and book also can have ID, right? So let us put it as credential. Okay. So what I'm thinking, why did I put as you can also put it as book ID and separate classes. this thing, member ID. Okay, so why did I go for credential? So this is where, even if you have thought it in your mind, you should spell it out loud to your interviewer that both IDs are some kind of credential. Okay, so I can have only one abstract class or interface, and two guys can go and implement that. Okay, so member will go and implement it as member ID, book will go and implement it as this thing, our book ID. Okay, so that's where you get to showcase your thought process. So I'll just put it as credential. I don't know right now. I don't know what to do with it, so I just put it as credential. Anything else? Do we see any kind of noun we have left? I don't think so. Yeah, there is no noun. Okay. Uh, Fine. Okay. Let's now what we have to do. How these classes are connected. Okay. Two tips. I mean, two information about class diagram. Uh, your attributes are your variables in your classes. Methods are your methods in your classes. Okay. Attributes, if they are private, then they should be listed like this with a minus sign. If they are public, they should be listed like plus. Same goes with methods, and if they are protected, they should start with hash. Okay. And both attribute, this applies to all methods and attributes, sorry, attributes and methods. Okay. If it's an attribute, then it would be of some type, correct? So what we do, it we write the name first, name colon, and then type. For example, I can write member name, that like what is the actual name of the member, and then type would be string. Okay. If you have a function, say get member name. Okay, so then you first write the member name, I mean the function name, then you put a colon, and then you put the return type. Okay, if it's void, then you put void. Suppose if it is public, you will put plus. If it is private, then you put minus. If it is protected, then you put hash. So this is one information which I wanted to give you. Another is, if you have an abstract class, okay, it has to be written in italics. That's it. Two informations for you. Okay, because when I saw credential, right, I thought it has to be an abstract because two classes will be interacting with it. So we'll come to it, why to make it abstract and all. Okay, so now you have written all your classes which are going to be there. It was very easy. Once you had those requirements, you just needed to figure out what are the nouns. Okay, now how do you put method, this thing? Next step is to put attributes and methods inside it. Okay, so what could be the method of a librarian? It could be add a book, right? That would take book as a parameter, correct? And it could be void, the return type, right? Another could be he has to register the user. Okay, now this is where I mean we are looking at our class diagram also. Okay, and we are looking at our class also. Okay, so what I'm seeing, wait, somebody is trying to join. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So yeah. So what I saw was I saw what the librarian is supposed to do. Okay. So librarian has how many associations? It had update, add, and delete. That means these three should be methods. Okay. Which I should definitely have inside my librarian class, and I should be able to also register the user. Okay. I think it should be register. Yeah. Who will register the user? Let me write it clearly. Member. Yeah, librarian will register the member. So what I do, I just simply pick up these four methods and I put it. Okay, where is it?
Uh, Sorry to interrupt,
Yeah,
Atul, but I think that register member you have already created, right? In the
register member as a method I haven't created.
no,
You
can you
mean in the
please go to the
diagram?
diagram?
Yeah, yeah, it's already there. Yeah, yeah. So this is by this. Yeah, then what is this? Okay, let us keep it register as librarian then.
So the librarian would be registering itself, right?
Yes, correct. So he should have this thing also. Register librarian. Okay, this again can return a status, or if you want, you can keep it void also. Okay, so most of the times it would be void. Okay, if you are keeping any kind of extra return like ints and all, right, you be very careful. Most of the times we use those for either names, strings and all. Otherwise we use it for returning status, that is this API call was successful or not. Okay, if you put int and start explaining, then it would go into a different direction. So if you think that you want to go into direction, that you can go. Otherwise, I'll suggest you keep it void most of the time. But then be prepared for questions that why you have kept it void, something like that. Okay. Now coming to library, what kind of methods the library management system should have? Okay, what could have? It could have. What it can have? So library will have some kind of name, right? So we can have some kind of name. Okay, that guy will return some string. Now be advised that this particular thing I'm just doing on my best guess. It's not written it over here. But since I had that noun, I have to give some kind of method over it, right? Now here is where you start thinking deep. That what kind of what kind of method should this guy have? So it can have one name, right? It will be situated in some kind of locality. So it will have some kind of ID. Okay. Now the question is, why are you giving this if in your assumption you have mentioned that there is only one library? We didn't mention? Ah, okay, we didn't mention. So suppose we were assuming that there is only one library. So why are we giving address and name? This is because this is where it will get scalability. If you don't give your name and address, then how would you scale the system in future? Right? If you give name and address, then you can just have a list of available libraries in the area, and that particular system can call your method for name and address, and you can store you. So that's how you build your this thing inside, scalability factor inside. Okay. So suppose it has to return the name and address, then it would also have this attribute. Okay. That would be minus. Okay, for attributes, you always remember default you should go with minus, that is private. Okay, if you're going with plus, you remember that you are violating a principle which is like you should never keep variables private. You should always expose it via getters and setters. I don't remember that name of that principle, but you got the idea, right? You already have methods. Why do you want to make them public? Okay, this is where even if I am the interviewer, I will be paying close attention that you don't make it public, or if you are making it public, you make sure it's a final variable. Okay. Yeah, that is one input. Yeah, so now this is correct. Book, obviously it will have methods. What will have? Get name and all, right? Those will be public. Get name, it would return a string. Get author, that would again return a string, right? How do I figure out these two with the names? One is common sense, another is I actually wrote something like here. So how would he search the books by title, author, and date? These should be attributes of your book class. So I put the variables. Now I want to put attributes here. So it should be minus of name, right? That should be string, minus of what author, right? That should also be a string, correct? Now coming to database, what kind of database you should have? We'll come to database later. Let's come to our account class. Okay, so what would an account be? It's actually an account for both member and the librarian, right? So it will have some kind of ID, correct? That ID would be obviously private, and it could be a string. Let's take it as string. It will also have password, right? That would also be a string. It can have also username, so that will also be minus. That will again be a string. Okay, and it will have status, that is it active or not. So that will also be you can give it as boolean, is active or something like that. Okay, so we have this thing. Okay, now what kind of methods it should have? Since it's an account, first thing what it should have is register kind of methods, right? So let's put plus of register account. Okay, it should also have a reset password, correct? And what should the return type? So reset password you can return actually as some kind of status, so you can return as int. Okay, and register account could be also int, because if you have a UI which and your register account API fails, how will that UI show that register account has failed? That means you need to return some kind of integer, and obviously you need to pass on some kind of parameter. So just figure out, string username and all, right? String password, right? Reset password, nothing. No, reset password for this user. So you need to pass on username. Correct. So these two could be here. Credential, of course, this is also very easier. It will have an ID. So minus of an ID. Let's put it as string. Correct. And what else? Method it can have get ID. So plus of a get ID. And this guy will return a string, right? Fine, what can it have? It can have a date when it was created, right?
Uh,
What else can have?
One
It can,
question,
yeah,
Atul.
yeah,
Why the return type for register account and reset password as integer?
yeah. So suppose you have a UI, okay, you have a mobile app for that library management system, and then you tried to register and that register failed, okay. So when you try to register, you actually called the register account API, correct? That much you will do, right? And that API is going to fail. So if it failed, how will your application come to know that that API has failed? It has to register, I mean, return something in that case, correct? So it will return as an integer a status, that status underscore error. So that's how your application side, your client, this side, left side will come to figure out, okay, my register account has failed, and it will show some error pop up.
You mean a status codes or something like that?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
correct. Okay. Yeah, and your fine will have book ID, it will have member ID, it will have the creation date. What else can you guys think of? Anything else? Amount calculator should be there then, right? That means let's put it as fine per day, per day. So it will be again int. Okay, yeah. And what kind of method it would have? It would have. I won't write all the methods, but one method which I can think of is calculate fine. Correct. This will return int, obviously. Okay. So, do you want me to write for everyone? You got the gist, right? How do you have to write? It's more of common sense, and you have to look back
Yes.
at your own design, what you created, to figure out how to write the variables inside it. Okay. Classes are very easy. You just go and figure out what all the nouns and just write them. And then inside the classes, you just have to use your common sense. And then what are these guys actually doing? Okay. Because these are for sure some methods. They will have to be adjusted in some of these classes. Okay. So I'll assume you
Atul,
guys
I have
are,
one question.
yeah.
Uh, Suppose like for that for this database part, the interviewer asks like to maintain our own own like data structures for like
Yes, correct. He will
uh,
definitely ask. That's why I wanted to keep it at last.
okay,
If you don't mind, then can you hold on to your question till I reach here?
yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, we'll come to that part definitely. That's why I left it at that point of time. Okay, what I wanted to move forward is what should be the relationship between those classes. After that, I'll come to your database questions. Okay, we have to actually discuss it. It's an important part. Precisely for the same reason what you said. Interview will definitely ask what is the internal schema of this database. Okay, yeah, so that's where you get to show your knowledge also. I'll use hash map, I'll use tree map, I'll use sets, I'll use linked list, something like that. So then he will deep dive with you. Okay, how, why will you use linked list and why will you not use arrays and something like that? Okay, so yeah, that's where we'll come to it. Yeah, so I just want to deep dive into a relationship between these classes. Okay, so what do you think should be the relationship between library and account and member? It is very clear, it's already there in our diagram. This is a generalized relationship. Okay, so we just will quickly put the generalized arrow over here. Okay, both of these two guys are some kind of account, so that's why I put it over here. Okay, the moment you put some kind of relationship, right, you just revisit for a short time your parameters. These parameters should be making sense for this particular guy, otherwise you'll have to override here and do some kind of null over here. Okay, and that you need to spell it out loud to your interviewer. Okay, suppose there was a function in account which was applicable only to librarian but to not to member, so you need to spell it out loud that okay, this function I will override in member and I'll do nothing, or I'll throw exception and all. Okay, so that's one thing you need to take care. Okay, account, what kind of relationship it has with user? So it will have association relationship. Okay, a user can have an account, correct? That means a user can have an account. So have is a verb, correct? Associations always have a verb, so you have a one to one, I mean have a relationship. Okay, how many accounts will a user have? He will have only one, correct? So in association we show multiplicity. That is, I just need to write 1 over here. That means what happened? Come over here, man. Yeah. So what I'm just trying to show it over here is a user can have only one account. So whatever is the variable, right? 1, 2, a user can have two accounts, that you write over whatever is varying. Okay. Suppose if a user could have had two accounts, then I would have come here and written 2. What I'm trying to show over here is user can have 2 accounts, 3 accounts. If user can have more accounts, then you just write asterisk. That means there are multiple accounts. Okay. Reverse is also true. An account will always have one user. Okay, so then you write 1 over here. Okay, if you see that, okay, account can have multiple users, then you accordingly increase this number. So association has this extra stuff with it. Okay, it will have a verb and it will have these numbers. Okay, that is one. uh, what is the relationship between user and member? Do you see any relationship between user and member? So user was someone who was not registered, member is someone who is registered. I don't think there is any relationship. They are two different guys. Okay. Of course, member, where is it? Member can also have, no, member and account doesn't have, they already have something. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. What is the relationship between credential and a member, and credential and a book? Credential is some kind of ID, right? That means a book can have an ID. So I can write have, correct? Same goes with particular member. A member can also have an ID, right? So I can have has association. Okay, and this guy can also have an ID. He will have an ID, so he can also have one credential. Let us give it like this. Okay. Yeah. 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 So what kind of relationship do you think librarian and a member has with library management system? They are both visiting that guy, right? So what would be our verb? Visits. Okay, so how am I able to figure out what kind of relationship between these two guys are having? So I'm just giving it my best guess, and I'm also keeping this diagram in mind. Where is my use case diagram? Okay, so my use case, how will it start? Librarian will come to the library in morning. That means he will visit it. That means there has to be a relationship between the library management system and librarian. Okay, next use case, user has come to library. That means he has visited it. That means there has to be a relationship between the member and library management system. That means visits, and that's it. That's how I'm figuring it out. Okay. Yeah, barcode, book will have a barcode, correct? And barcode can exist independently of the book, right? So if you remember, we can have an aggregate relationship between them. That is this guy, aggregation. How do you aggregate? Whatever class is going to be aggregated, the arrow should be towards that guy. Okay. So this is how you aggregate. Okay. Yeah, and database, who will have the database? Okay. Before we go to database, a library management system will have the book inside it, right? What do you think will happen to the library if it is burnt? The book will die with it. That means it has a composition relationship, correct? Books live inside a library, die with the library. Okay. How about the database? Database, does it live inside the book or does it live in the library management system? Of course, it lives in the system. That means, and it dies with the system also. So it will have something like that, right? And what does the database has? It has books. It has, yeah, it has just books, right? So there will be an association with this guy, with has. Okay. So where are we? We are in fine also, correct? So what will happen with fine? Fine has to be paid by the member, correct? So there will be an association between member and fine. So he pays. We just write in association, we always write verb. And what will be the multiplicity factor? So how many fines can the member pay? He can pay n number of fines, correct? So n, we have to write it over here towards the fine. How many fines can a member have? Again, n, he can have n number of fines, right? So again, n into n, I mean, asterisk you can put both ends. correct. Also, fine will be on a book, right? Correct. Yeah, but I mean, I'm thinking where would be the entries of fine maintained? I think it will be maintained in DB. So has. Okay. Yeah. So this is your class diagram for this thing, our use case. Okay. Any doubt? Anyone? I hope you're able to understand.
Atul, are
Yeah.
we using verb between, I mean, relation, let's say I'm relating member with fine.
Mhm.
So you mentioned pays. So
Yes.
are we mentioning the verb between these two?
Yes. Association always mentions verbs. Okay. That is the
Okay.
only line which has some words in it. No other line has any word. Only association has word, and that was word is a verb.
And what's the difference between has and have then?
Okay, has is like a database can has, I mean, it will have one find. So you can also, if we consider only one book, it will have only one find. In that case, it's actually singular and plural. So have is a plural of this thing, no? Has. So that's why I wrote
Okay,
has.
nothing like it's just a keyword which we
Just a
decide
keyword.
it's not.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Because when I was forming the association, I was actually reading, right? Like a database will have a fine, or a fine will, member will pay a fine. So I was just writing whatever was coming to my mind. You can very well write have, but then you will have to read it somehow, right? So how will you read? Member will have a credential. Yeah, it fits also. Yeah, that also fits. Has and have both fit. No, no special difference. Yeah. Any other question? Okay, yeah. Now coming to the interesting part over here. So till now in this class diagram, all you had shown to your interviewer is you are aware of these signs and plus and minus and attributes and all. Okay, nothing special. Everyone is aware. Where does the fun begin? Fun begins in where you showcase that how you are going to design the internal schema of something like database. Because it's a very simple management system, right? I mean, there is no concurrency because only one library is there, only one window we have assumed. Oh, we didn't assume that. We had to write somewhere over here. There is only one library. There is only one booking window. Okay. So yeah. So nothing to showcase here. So we choose our database. Okay. So you will have to put that. Okay. I will maintain a list of books available in the library. Now the question is, do you maintain a list? Do you maintain a heap, or do you maintain a hash map? Do you maintain a hash table or something like that? What do you maintain? So obviously the answer is hash map. Why? Because uh, in a library, the first thing a user will come and he will ask is, hey, where is this? Do you have this book? That means you have to do a search function. Hashmap guarantees order of one searching, right? That means you'll have to maintain the list. The list of books as a hash map. You can maintain a hash map of the book name, comma, this thing, the book object. You should also maintain a hash map of authors, comma, book. Also, if you, I mean, whatever, I mean, we only took two, but if you had a year of publication, you would have maintained a hash map of year of publication, comma, the books. Okay, and it would be a list of books. Suppose one author has written two, three books, then it would be a list of books. So if I have to write the attribute, one of the attributes would be book titles, right? Yeah. What it would be? Hash map. Okay. Of what kind? String, and what kind? Array list. Okay. He will come back that why are you choosing array list? Why not a simple array? Okay, so you should be prepared for that kind of question. So I hope you know why did we choose array list and why not array. Array are difficult to manipulate, array list are very easy to manipulate. That's the only reason. Okay, there can be multiple reasons as well. I mean, it's just a data structure question at that point now. So yeah, that's how you showcase what kind of array list you are going to maintain. Also, if you can think of some kind of concurrency over here, that if you had two windows and both of users are coming over here and trying to say issue the book, then you will have a entry over here, right, which will be like issue book list. Issued book list, correct? So this cannot be a hash map now. It has to be a concurrent hash map. Okay, why concurrent? Because you want concurrency to be maintained. So rather than maintaining it through yourself through locks and all, you just maintain it through a concurrent hash map. Now, with if you are using a concurrent hash map, you can also say to the interviewer that when I want to iterate over this hash map, I will use an iterator instead of a for each loop, because iterators in concurrent hash map are fail fast. So if there is a concurrency condition, they will throw an exception and they will fail. Okay, that's what you want to do. Okay, you don't want to be like somebody's reading the hash map and he's taking, okay, this book is issued, and in I mean this book is not issued, and parallelly somebody else is going to issue it. I mean he's already issued. Something like that shouldn't happen. So that's where you start talking interesting stuff like this, that I'll use hash map, or I'll use a concurrent hash map, then I'll use an iterator to iterate inside that. Okay. Yeah, I hope that answered the question about databases.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Now coming, yeah, any other questions on that part? Okay, yeah. So as I said, this is a very simple system, right? So we just showcase our knowledge of, say, Java or hash maps or database schema in this particular section. How do we show the knowledge of our design patterns now? Okay. So that we'll show in our skeleton code. So we are short of time, but the skeleton code was simply you just start creating classes. So I had already created one project, but I didn't write anything. So we just create packages and all. Okay, and this has to be production level code. So now you need to figure out very clearly what could be your util classes, util package, what could be your say main package. Do you want to have members in one package, something like that? Okay. But if it's you can I mean if it's an interview, you can just in your skeleton code, the last, I mean second part was skeleton code, right? So if obviously you will not use say any ID like IntelliJ. So what you can do is I'll put one package name something over here, package say XYZ comma XYZ dot something, and then I will write some class name over here. Okay, something like that, and I'll import stuff. Okay, this import should be proper. It should be compilable. Okay, then in the same file you can do a next package also, because obviously he'll just give you one screen to type. So what to do? Yeah, something like that. Okay, but this code should be compilable. It should be production quality. Okay, that means it should be commented also. Okay, so what I usually do is maybe I can put an author kind of comment, author and date and something like that. Okay, he will ask that, okay, do you usually put your comments and all? So just read online that putting comments in as author and date is valid or not. But I do usually put it, so I'm not sure what should be the correct answer for that. Okay, that basically shows how do you code usually in your work. Okay, and yeah, the class should be production quality. Now, how to convert to a class? It's very easy. Whatever you have written, just write it over there. You already know the attributes and methods. Okay, so in skeleton code, we just write the attributes. So if I have to write the skeleton code for this, I would just write librarian, and I will write what add book. So it is void and it has to be public void add book with book as a parameter. Book. Okay, just this much. Now the thing is what to do with this book. Okay, that means there will have to be a variable over here which will be some kind of array list in this database. That means there has to be a database object here. Okay, so database. Okay, db. It's a private, let's make it private database db. Okay, when do you assign it? You assign it in the constructor. So you make a public constructor of librarian. Actually, not librarian. Ah, librarian, right? So why this guy is having database? Sorry. I thought, I thought it's something else. A library management system is there. Okay, okay. I was writing librarian. Where is my librarian? Here it is. Yeah, add book, right? Yeah, yeah. So he doesn't need database, or does he need? Yeah, he needs database, man. So let's write Control Z. Yeah, private DB. So when this guy should get database, he should get it while he's getting constructed. That means I will pass it as a dependency in this constructor. DB. Okay. And now why did I pass it as DB? And first of all, this name should start with small m because it's private. Okay, just go through common best practices in code. You will be able to figure out why name should start with private in Java, right? And yeah, if it would have been Eclipse, no, this should have been formatted, but you format it in your this thing in your interview. Okay, the code should be formatted also. Okay, so why did
I
I
have a
compose
question.
this? Yeah,
Yeah, the question is in the code. Like, suppose like we have multiple librarians in a library. So
correct.
every librarian object will have its own database then along with it.
Yeah, I'll answer that, but I just need to correct myself over here. New DB. Yeah, first, why did I write this? Because I went back to my diagram. I saw that it has composition relationship because that means this guy was actually creating database. So that's why I'm writing it. It's constructor. Okay. This guy will have a dependency injection. Book will have a dependency injection of barcode. Okay. Now coming back to your question. Your question was suppose if a library has multiple librarians, which is a valid use case, then does every librarian have its own database? The answer to that is no. Database is singular. In that case, what we will do is we will pass database as a dependency injection in librarian from inside library management system. So whenever you are creating librarian, suppose I'm this is my class for library management system. I will just write as like MD management system LBMS, just short form. Then when this class is getting created, right, I will create everything. I will create a librarian also, right? And I will compose it with MDB. Okay. So if you have librarian 2, then you can compose it with same DB in all the librarians. Okay. And this is also a very interesting point. We never wrote in our requirement that there should be a single or this how many librarians. Okay. So just to make your life easier, you should take that as your assumption that there will be only one librarian. Okay. But put a comment over there. Okay. Can be say something like this. Only one librarian. Comment you just write can be multiple, and if possible, right, do try to visit this case, because in that case you can show that you know about dependency injection and you will inject it over here. Okay, then the discussion will go towards, because I am changing now the construction of librarian, right? Before it was librarian we used to construct database. Now the system is used to constructing database and passing it as here. So now the question or your discussion will move towards how will you design a system which is because now you will have to modify your existing librarian class, which is bad, right? So how do you get around with it? I mean, there are design practices, design patterns to get around with it. So you can push a design pattern forward. For example, in this case, you can do it with strategy also. Okay, and decorator also you can use. You can decorate your librarian with say DB number 1 or DB number 2. Suppose you have multiple databases, so you can use a decorator to decorate a librarian. Therein you can throw your design patterns. Okay, yeah, that is one. So how do you write your classes? Just copy paste this over here. Okay, every class already has. You just need to copy paste. That would bring your skeleton code. So skeleton code should be very easy to code and very fast to code. The real fun would begin when you actually he will ask you to write the actual implementation. So that code mostly you won't have time, because we spent like 1 hour 45 minutes just to do this much, right? So usually nobody has in a 1 hour interview you'll not have time, but if it's a 2 3 hours interview, then you have to write full code. So be prepared for that. So we'll have to take care of everything, who is constructing who, there is a null check, what to do and all. Okay, so I'll just bypass that complete code. Okay, you can get it online anywhere. I'll come to next crucial step, which is test case and exceptions. Okay, so what should be the test case for a book? Okay, the test case for a book should be what happens if the book is not having name and only having author. Okay, so when you create a new book, you just pass null book and all, it should not crash. So these are test cases, no? These you need to just explain it to your interviewer that in my main, wherever my main function is running, I will just write a test case that test book not null, something like this. Okay, and in this, and this is just a pseudo code. This doesn't need to production quality. Okay, but you make it production quality if you can, and just write that create a book. Okay, create a null book. No, no, pass a null book in librarian dot add method. This would be one test case. Okay. Now, one point, test case, while writing a test case, you follow single responsibility principle. That means one test case should do only one kind of test. Okay, you should not write something like pass a null book in librarian add method and also pass date. Don't write something like that. Okay, it should, one test case should always test only one stuff. Okay, that is about test case, and test cases can be of every class, account also, credential also, and it's very simple. Just figure out three kinds of test cases: negative, boundary, and functional. Okay, and you just need to write pseudocode. You don't need to write like full code of that. Okay, but if you're writing, then just write a full code. That would be my suggestion. That test case, and
Atul,
yeah.
I'm just stuck on this part actually. Like for a librarian also, like there will be a number of members, like a list of members maybe.
Correct. Yes, it will be.
Correct, right. So while initializing it in the library management system, will we pass it as a constructor, the list of members
Yes, you will
to
pass the
the
complete DB.
okay,
Okay.
complete DB?
Yeah, the
Okay.
DB will have everything inside it. Okay. Now, yeah, coming to your, if I would have been your interview right now, I would have taken you on a ride to that. Would you pass the same DB to both librarian and to member, or would you pass a part of that DB to librarian and to member? Okay, because the idea is librarian can do something with every part of that DB, right? But what will a member do with the list of other members? Correct. So will I pass it? Now I'm questioning your ability that, do you bifurcate your DB now? Do you go back to your design and figure out, okay, DB should have, say, sub DBs, book should have some part of that DB and something like that. Okay, but one thing is clear, you'll have to pass it in constructors everywhere. Okay,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. But don't worry, you can obviously come and change your diagram. It is always changeable. Okay. Yeah, so I covered the test cases part as well. Now exceptions. Okay, exceptions, they follow test cases. So it's simply like what exception should add book throw. Okay, does it need to throw any exception? Obviously, it needs to throw an exception because I mean this is just a class, right? Where is our diagram? Huh. So this entire system, it is running behind a mobile app or a web interface, correct? So if you have some failure in your ad book, how will the user come to know that there is some failure? That means it has to throw some kind of exception. So you throw some meaningful exceptions. Suppose I have to throw something over here, then I'll just write throws book not added exception, something like this. Okay, something like this. Okay, so then he might ask like what is throws and all, throwable or something like this. You have to have knowledge of that. But he might ask what is this book not add exception. So obviously this will be an exception in some of your skeleton code. There will be a package exception. You'll have to write it, of course. And in that package, there will be multiple classes. One of them will be book not added exception, which will throw some stack trace and all, or print some stack trace. Okay, but you go into this direction only when you think that your interview has not gone that good and you want to impress your interviewer anyhow, because this exception is not very well documented. Only by practice you will be able to figure out like, do I need to throw an exception or not? Because sometimes applications have another ways to finding out this API failed or not. Okay, yeah, yeah. That brings us to the end of this session. We ran out of actually time. Otherwise, I would have covered car parking also. Any questions, guys?